In this video, we're actually going to start modeling by first, again, thinking about the topology of our object. And this is a really important decision. You may feel initially that you just want to jump right through this. But again, all this preparatory stuff, the stuff that seems slow right now, will save you tons of time later on. But it's also going to help you, kind of just think about the process a little bit. So the first thing we need to really think about here is, what is the most efficient primitive to start with, right? Like, we can't really just start from nowhere. We need Maya to create something in order to start us off, right? So we could start this with a flat plane, but that wouldn't be really useful because this isn't a flat object. And it's not running only along two of the coordinate axes. It's not a donut shape, so we don't need to use our torus. It's not really a cone shape. We don't need to use a cone. But the other three, the cylinder, the box, and the sphere, all of these we could potentially use for this. And I'll show you a few different approaches to each one. But one of the things I like to ask myself when I'm trying to choose the right objects here is, what do I get for free when I use a primitive, right? So each one of these gives you certain things when it creates this for you. And some of this is going to give you more information than you want, and you'll have to delete it. Others it's going to maybe you'll have to create more and rather than delete. So for example, this is kind of a cylindrical object. This is round, right, in one of our axes here. So that could be really useful, and a cylinder would be great for that, and a box really wouldn't be. But it's also got a spherical cap on it. And that means that the sphere would be pretty good for that. But the sphere is kind of round everywhere else, and so would it really be useful for this? And I'm going to say yes, because one of the hardest things to create from scratch is a perfect sphere. So we want to get that for free. So I'm going to start with a sphere here, and you can see that it's created my 8x8 sphere. And that's very important here, again, because remember, we want to stay in a low poly workflow, right? We don't want too much information. So if you have a sphere that looks different than this, you'll probably want to change this to 8x8, right? Like, you may have a sphere that looks like this, the 20x20 sphere. And if you do, you can go into your channel box here, click on your inputs, and change this to 8x8. So now, there's a couple of things we need to do to sort of prep this thing for modeling. One of the things that we need to do to this is, the sphere is sort of an interesting object. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but you'll notice that all of the sides on this, all the polygons, so if I go into face mode and I select some of these polygons, or I hover over these, you'll notice that each one of these polygons has 4 edges to it, right? This is a 4-sided polygon. This is a 4-sided polygon. This is a 4-sided polygon. And that's what we want. These, on the other hand, are 3-sided. These are triangles, and this is bad. And we'll get into more of that later on, but for now, just know that this is off limits. And so in order to get started on this, we need to create 4-sided polygons out of these 3-sided polygons. And this is very easy to do just by kind of holding down the shift key, clicking on every other one of these, holding down the control key, and hitting delete. And now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides on these. And it's very important that you hold down the control key when you delete these. So when I delete these, control, delete. And now this thing is ready to go. And in a separate video, I'm going to explain the importance of the 4-sided polygon, or the quad. But in this video, let's just get started. Okay, so now I've got my sphere. It's prepped and ready to go. I'm going to right-click and go into object mode, and I'm going to slide this up to the top. So the first thing we probably need to do is scale this down. So I'm going to grab my scale tool and scale it down. Now, you're also probably wondering, well, it's kind of hard to see what's going on behind this. I can't really trace this very well because the sphere is sort of getting in the way. So in order to fix that, we can go up to the top of our viewport here and hit the X-ray button. And that's going to allow us to see through our object. So if I slide that up, there we go. Now that's lined up pretty well. So we got a sphere here, but we don't really have much as far as the rest of the object is concerned. So this is where we're going to start moving things around. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my split view for this. I want to be able to see what's going on in my perspective view, but in modeling, a lot of what you do is going to happen in these orthographic views or these flat views. So I'm going to hit split view here and get back to my perspective view so that we can kind of see how this develops in three-dimensional space as well as two-dimensional space. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to make the rest of this, I want to kind of start to flesh out the rest of this because we've got the top done, but we need to somehow create some more geometry for the bottom. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go into vertex mode and I'm going to select some of these individual points here. So one thing you'll notice is just like any other program, you could just click to select something. You can see I just clicked on that point, left clicked on it. And I can also hold down the shift key and click to select multiple points, right? And that's pretty cumbersome. You know, like if I have to click on each one of those points individually every time, that turns into a real headache. And you can see I can do it, but it's sort of annoying, right? So the best way to select, especially when you're in this flat view here, is to just what's called marquee select, where I click and drag over the whole group of points at the bottom here, and that's a pretty great way to do this. So I did that, and you can do that in vertex mode or points mode. And once I do that, I'm just going to grab this whole group of points and pull it all the way down to the bottom, so that it is kind of extending down, and we start to get the beginning of the cylinder for our chess piece. Now, this is good, but not really great, right? You can see that the bottom of our thing isn't actually flat. And that's sort of annoying, right? Because it's still got the sort of bottom of the sphere thing going on right there. So there's a few ways you can flatten this out. The first instinct that people have is usually just to say, okay, well, I'll just click on this point down here, grab it, and pull it up. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a faster way. Right? If I've got all these points selected, I can actually use my scale tool to flatten all of these points out and onto a single plane. So if I click on the scale tool here, you'll see that one of the cool things about the scale tool is really what it does is it pushes things apart and brings things together. So for example, if I'm looking at the bottom of my chess piece here, right? I can pull on one of these handles to make this bigger in this direction. I can pull on the handle to make it bigger in this direction. I could pull on the handle to make it bigger in both directions at once, which actually is kind of useful. So maybe I'll just leave it there, but it's still not flat at the bottom, right? We've still got that little bump in the bottom. And just to, maybe I'll make that smaller again, just so that you can kind of see that it still does indeed have that little bump. So to flatten that out, we just pull on the handle here and we push it downward towards itself. Because you'll see that if we pull up on this handle, we can pull these things further apart, right? But if we push down on the handle, we can actually push them closer together. So I can grab this handle and just push down like that, and boom, it's flat. And that is by far and away the most useful way to use the scale tool. This is like where the scale tool rocks, is in that department. So then once I've got that flattened out, I just switch back to my move tool by hitting the W key and then slide that up. Okay, so now we've got the beginnings of our shape, right? Now the problem is I don't have any points here to grab onto. And so we're going to learn about our first shelf tool here. And that is the shelf tools. You're going to use a lot of these to add geometry. So the first tool we're going to learn here is the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut tool is pretty great. And basically what you do here, let's go back into perspective mode to look at this, is if I click on the multi-cut tool, what it's designed to do is to add geometry in a variety of ways. We're going to use it in this very specific way. So if I hover the multi-cut tool over my geometry and hold down the control key on the keyboard, you'll see that I get this loop that appears that goes all the way around my cylinder here. And that is exactly what we want. You could actually use this to cut one click at a time, but please don't do that. That is horribly time consuming and inaccurate. You can see that I'm not being very precise here. So the best way to use the multi-cut tool is to hold down the control key and just click. So we're going to go back into our orthographic view here, and I'm going to start adding more geometry. So I'm going to click, and basically I want to add this everywhere where there's a major pivot in the angle of my object. So if I click here, yes, one right there, maybe one there, 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 maybe two for that, one there, one there, and one there. Okay, so now I need to make these the proper dimensions. And to do that, I'm just going to use my scale tool, and I'm going to select the points that I need to scale. Now there's two ways you can do this. So the first way would just be as we did before. We can click and drag and select one loop of vertices here. You can see that I've got all these selected just because I clicked and dragged over the whole loop. The other way is you could go into edge mode and you can simply double click on the edge and it will select the whole loop that goes around in that ring there. We'll talk about why that's the case in the next video. So now I'm just going to use my scale tool and I'm going to scale this, and I'm going to use the center of my scale tool. I'm just going to click on the center of the scale tool and scale it in, and voila. Then I'm going to click on this ring here, use the center of the scale tool, scale it out, double click, center, scale it out, double click, center, scale it out. And you can see that this is starting to look pretty good. And it's not that hard, right? It's not hard because we started with the right topology. So again, double click to select the ring, scale it. And you can also see that this is very easy because I don't have a lot of geometry, right? I'm keeping this, as we say, in our low poly workflow, right? If I had more geometry, if I had a lot more points to select, this would be harder to move around. So again, just like that. And then let's grab the bottom here. Now the bottom, you'll notice this isn't selecting when I double click on it. And we're going to talk about why that is in the next video. But for now, you can see that even though this is a little bit jagged, kind of looks like a video game pawn piece from the late 90s or early 2000s, right? But it's all kind of there, right? And we've got a nice quick approximation of this object. And 90% of the time when we model, this is a perfect start to our model, right? And we did this just by kind of expanding on the right topology. So we picked a good place to start and we augmented that geometry nicely. So in the next video, we're going to talk about some of the logic underneath the process that we just learned and the importance of using quads rather than triangles or other shapes that we'll talk about.